firm to come up with a design for a STEM space that would be a flexible enough space to change with changing curriculum in the coming years. The firm is just developing the plan and is going to be speaking with staff, administration, board members, and community members to get input. They also plan to hold 2 public forums and more, but you'll hear more about that in the coming months. We had a dedication ceremony for our new turf field. It's up and running and very active. And the Amherst Community Foundation is now looking at a kind of a beautification plan, which is going along with the turf field and going to be incorporated at the same time as the bricks were actually incorporated. And by the way, the bricks are still for sale. So, and not only bricks, but if there are companies or individuals who want to make larger donations for plaques or whatever, those are for sale as well. So they have not stopped the fundraising at this point. We had open house last night at the high school, and we have started negotiations with our PPC, which also includes our support staff.
All right, very good. Amherst School Board.
Just a couple things. We had a nice presentation on the makerspace at the Amherst Middle School. There's a video that was presented at the back to school night, and it highlights a great partnership between the school and a group of citizens who put together a really amazing space over there where the community can come in and use various equipment to create lots of different items.
We actually have that video we're going to show tonight.
Oh, okay, great.
So this might be a good time.
Okay.
Christine? This is a video of what Amy is talking about, the makerspace that's alive and well and flourishing at the middle school. And some of you have seen it, but I wanted all the board members to see that as it relates to STEM as we go through that.
Okay,
so.
Great.
More now than ever, innovation and industry are advancing quicker than our schools are able to adopt and then teach. In today's world, students need a better way to gain exposure to the latest STEM technologies, collaborate on current industry trends, and learn to use modern tools.
A makerspace is a great place where education and real-world learning and classroom content and skills can all come together. Not only for our students, but also for community members as well. Making doesn't know an age. You can be very young or you can be much more experienced. And the makerspace offers a place for novice and experienced people to come together, to solve problems, to create, to really take what they imagine and then make it into a reality.
Imagine for one moment a nonprofit organization comprised of local businesses, volunteers, engineers, artisans, and makers all working together to help support STEM in our schools, and then take these very same resources and make them available to the entire community. Amherst Makerspace is a nonprofit organization made up of a governing body of volunteers who are all working in collaboration with the Amherst Recreation Department and the Amherst Middle School.
Well, the Makerspace movement is something that's really excited me for a few years ago when I went to one of my conferences and saw some of the great things that school districts were doing throughout the country to do innovation and design. And then I went to a workshop on Makerspace itself, and it just at that point I realized that with the facilities we have that were being relatively unused, in my opinion, it was a great opportunity for us to try to create a makerspace area that our children could share during the school day, and then the community could use. I think just a makerspace idea.
The Amherst Middle School offered its entire innovation and design wing for use as our very own community makerspace. Working as a subsidiary of the Amherst Recreation Department, Amherst Makerspace is funded by its memberships, workshop fees, and donations, and is able to provide its services without any tax impact upon our residents.
Well, We're really excited about the Makerspace, and we'd like to expand it into the community. We have several programs that we're looking to launch to help bring different members of the community into the Makerspace, to help grow the knowledge base and provide educational benefits to everybody. So the RETAP for STEM program is an opportunity for retired engineers to provide technical assistance in the classroom to help out with the students in their STEM education. Just because an engineer is retired doesn't mean they stop being an engineer. And this gives them the opportunity to participate in the community, to keep their skills sharp, and to help out in the STEAM program in the middle school by helping out with the wood shop, 3D printing, laser printing, designing, CAD work, whatever their skill set they would like to bring into the system is. They can bring that to the school, help out with the kids, and help grow the program and provide more opportunities for the students. Another avenue of involvement that we're looking forward to is having high school students volunteer and mentor younger students in engineering programs. The volunteers will earn Makerspace time, will be able to help grow the community and help educate everybody with what they're working on, and to be able to broaden their knowledge as well as help other students.
Programs like these will help provide students more access to making. Making provides another pathway to learning different content areas in a context that has real meaning. It's about teaching kids how to learn. There's nothing more powerful to build a student's sense of intrinsic motivation than making something that really matters to them. It's a win-win for the school and our community. The entire community benefits from having a makerspace. It provides a hub for makers of all ages to meet, work on projects, and learn from each other. With a family membership, parents can take an active role in helping their children be creative and learn new concepts together. By having relationships with local businesses, our focus will be on procuring the tools and the knowledge required to keep STEM education relative to industry and help expose and prepare our students for a career in STEM.
So we're very excited about that. And Amy, thanks. I didn't have a chance to tell you we were going to run that today.
That's okay.
So behind the voice and behind the camera is Brad Freeman. So it's Brad Freeman's voice you're hearing. He's the tech person, one of the tech people at the middle school, tech integrator, and you could add another 20 words around that title. Brad, I don't know if you wanted to say anything about this.
So you suggested what the program is from the video. We're excited to be able to offer this opportunity to the community. These resources that normally sit idle in the evening will now be available to community members to work on projects like you saw. We're charging a membership for that. Those membership fees then go back into the program to help buy tools that not only the adults get to use, but the children as well. And then we're looking to start these little programs like that, RETAP, to bring in engineers from the community to help teach the children in the classroom, support the one person that's teaching that class right now. He's very busy in that classroom with all those students. A lot going on and a lot of tools that can be very dangerous. So we want to try to get him as much help as possible during the day so that the students can get their hands on this equipment and can use it and learn to use it.
So am I correct in saying that it's the first community makerspace in a public school in New Hampshire?
That is correct. As far as we're aware of, there is no other school that has opened up their building to the public community to make this makerspace. It's really a great relationship. Normally, makerspaces really rely on their memberships to keep their doors open. If their membership levels go down, the space is closed. The space is always open. You know, the lights are on. We still have to heat that building. You know, the tools are available. So if we have a soft start and people slowly come in, that's fine. And, you know, it's not like we're going to shut it down. So I'm hoping that this gets grounded and grows gradually over time. And it's just another great opportunity for the people in this community.
Thanks, Brad.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I want to recognize Porter Dodge, the principal of the Amherst Middle School, for providing a tremendous amount of leadership to make this happen, and Bethany Bernasconi as well. So, and then just a couple other things that we're focusing on. Christine gave us a solid update on the literacy curriculum at our board meeting, and we are continuing to look at creating a data dashboard, and the 4 chairs actually met and spoke about that, so we're continuing our discussions and moving that forward this year.
All right, thank you. Mount Vernon School Board.
We had the opportunity, we started the meeting with a meet and greet with our new staff, so we have quite a few new staff members in Mount Vernon this year. So it's a great opportunity for us to meet with them. And that kind of led into a presentation by Christine talking about looking at a mentor program and formalizing that to support those new teachers. We also reviewed our building maintenance and looked at the work that was done during the summer, and similar to the Amherst board, we've been on this thing about creating a dashboard, or we'll call it a report card for the school. So we keep pushing that and making that part of our work during the meeting. I think that's pretty much it.
Okay, thank you. All right, public comment. We actually have public tonight, so anyone wish to speak or have a question? Jean?
Hi, John. I just want to make sure that there's the appropriate time or ability to make comments when the presentations are made later on.
Yeah, that's going to be a question and answer session. So you'll have an opportunity.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions? No? All right, moving on. Consent agenda. All right, we have 4 sets of minutes here. Not likely that everybody attended every one. So why don't we tackle them singularly? I'll have a motion and a second for each one, and that way, if you weren't here and you can't vote on it, not an issue, all right? I'm waiting.
I'll move to approve the April 7th minutes. I'll move to approve all of them.
No, don't do that.
Yeah, no, but each time, so she cut and paste.
All right. He's a serial mover.
Yes.
Is there a serial seconder?
I'll second it because I was at all of them. So.
Okay, Peter will second all of them. We'll take them one at a time. First one, minutes of April 7th. There's a motion to pass the minutes of April 7th.
I'll make a motion.
Oh, no, we're already set with motions. Is there
Oh.
any discussions?
Oh.
Everyone's fine? All those in favor of April 7th, passing April 7th minutes as written?
No abstention.
Oh, I have to abstain.
Okay.
If you abstain, raise your hand after the...
Yes.
This is a nightmare for our minutes taken.
It's all right, though.
Thanks, Tony.
Number 2.
All right, May 26th. All those in favor? All those opposed? Any abstentions? Moving on. July 7th. All those in favor? All those against?
No.
Any abstentions?
Abstain.
Amy abstains. Sarah abstains. And July 27th. All those in favor? Any against? Any abstentions? All set? All right, moving on. Treasurer's reports. Adam, you have anything to present? You have the floor. Any questions?
I'll move to adopt the rest of the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second here. All those in favor of passing the rest of the consent agenda? If the ayes have it. Thank you very much. We're through with the consent agenda. Presentation and reports. Strategic plan update.
Could I just, before we start, I want to kind of configure the meeting for you tonight. There's a couple of places that we're going to go from one place to another. If you look on your agendas, so there's informational items. we're going to do. Barrett Christina is coming. He's the attorney for New Hampshire School Boards Association. He'll be coming at 7. So we have until 7 o'clock to do the presentation and to look at the informational items, so I think we have plenty of time. I know you're thinking Red Sox and Patriots, so I want to make sure you're understanding of how the meeting's going to go. I'd like to introduce Frank Brown. Frank is the chair of our Streamline Committee, and he and that committee have done quite a bit of work to get to this evening, and I thank that committee for their work. I think after Frank's presentation, there will be time for questions as well. Also, in the informational items, there's nothing to vote on tonight. It's just informational at this point. So, Frank? Okay. Frank, do you have a microphone?
Yeah, I do. First, thanks for this opportunity. What I want to do tonight is review our charter. It's been 4 or 5 months since we were here last, so hopefully you all remember it. Update you on the work we've done since then, because we've been meeting probably 6 or 7 times since then. Trying to advance this. We're working on a calendar that is looking potentially towards a vote on this in this coming March. So I say that up front, just so maybe you'll pay a little bit more attention and say, wait a minute, this is coming real fast. So we know that, we talked about that, but I just alert you up front. We have a recommendation, what we have done to sort of understand, and it's just our thoughts. It's not a specific plan, but what would it take to sort of get to that? How would we communicate to the community, et cetera? And then we want to seek your advice sort of going forward. So we would hope that right after this we could meet with the boards next month, because this is a little bit of a upper level, and we see the board meetings maybe the ability to go down, answer questions that are specific to that particular community, like the high school or the Clark Wilkins, and then the village school, because we anticipate some of those questions and concerns are going to be different. And then after that, we would like to come back a month from now at this meeting to sort of understand, maybe have revised, updated our proposal, whatever it is, and then maybe seek a little bit more formal potential endorsement. So who makes up this committee? It's actually a pretty diverse group. There's a number of board members on the committee, current board members. There's some past board members. There's a number of people from the SAU staff, and then there's some people from just the general, the town business communities. Our goal, taken directly from the plan, was to investigate options for the school district configurations to improve operational efficiency, and we added into that operational to include costs as well as just the educational effectiveness of the programs offered. And then there were the strategies. We have sort of taken a subset of that, initially focused on our first review on what were the most obvious alternatives. And if you remember, we looked at 4 different configurations. We selected one, eliminated the other 3 because there was no real cost benefit and no real educational benefit change in those configurations. And then a couple of them were eliminated because of the political, we felt, unacceptability of that, the closing of let's say, the village school, or closing one of the Clark Wilkins schools. So we continued to look at consolidation. It was our recommendation back then, with the initial, and for some period of time we weren't going to specify that, but to keep both or all 3 of the village school and Clark Wilkins open because of the current sort of enrollment as well as sort of staffing issues. So these were the net recommendations. I just sort of went through them. The negative impact of trying to close the school, and that wouldn't be acceptable to any of the communities. The single district, we thought, offered the ability to much more effectively manage the education process as well as the resources. There is not a lot of cost savings at the time we thought associated with this. I'll throw a number of $300,000 or $400,000. Some of that was cost savings associated with the some SAU staffing reductions that may occur, and then there potential would be cost savings over time as you were able to do things differently. Yeah, the last point was also that if you, whatever cost savings you achieve, not only do you see some cost savings, we also sort of bend the curve a little bit in terms of, which is slowly going up to maybe go from a 3 or 4% increase, in some cases decrease, to maybe accelerate that a little bit. So our focus since then is to go back and actually reaffirm, because we took a sort of a high level and the obvious things. So we went back and reaffirmed both, okay, what do we see from a cost savings viewpoint, and what about the impact in terms of the educational quality, the effectiveness of running the schools. So the first thing we did was we reassessed and confirmed the impact on the education quality and effectiveness. We went back, gathered more detailed information from all of the SAU leadership team. We developed a questionnaire, solicited their input through all of that. But maybe most importantly to our group, we solicited input this time, which we did not the first time, to the 4 principals, and had them and say, okay, so if we were to implement this configuration, what would be the impact on the school, both positive and negative? We sort of, it's open. You know, if you don't like it, tell us. If you think it's going to hurt, tell us. But if you see benefits, both to the way the school is run and both now and going forward, you know, we'd like to understand those, to be able to communicate those. We looked to develop an implementation calendar. So what would it take to actually get to March 17th? And this is the first step in doing that, and sort of start to get you all to understand what is really involved in this, because I'm sure it seems like a lot. And then having gotten additional feedback and explain why we made certain things or recommending certain things, or try to really identify what are the issues that you and then really the voters, the parents, would have, and how could they, might they be addressed in this proposal to sort of minimize them, eliminate them, or just understand that there may be 1 or 2 things that maybe can't be, and somebody's going to swallow hard and say, okay, that's, but the cost of that versus the benefit of it, that's a very acceptable trade-off. So we have developed a communications plan. You'll see part of that, again, as an outline, just to give you an idea of what could be done, should be done, we think, and be added to. We've developed a set of FAQs, frequently asked questions, that we think people are going to ask, and try to put ourselves in the, okay, if I'm in Mount Vernon, what am I going to be concerned about? If I'm in, somebody at the Clark School, what am I concerned about, et cetera, et cetera. That's about 7 or 8 pages at this point. Last, we also tried to understand just the whole warrant article process. You know, when we say propose on the ballot, what does that mean? And so, just so you understand the direction that it's heading, it really, as far as we understand right now, and think whether that's the way it could be done, the way it should be done, is there'd be a warrant article on each of the school boards or ballots that sort of said, would you vote to sort of consolidate the districts and go to a consolidated district, with any one of them deciding that they didn't want to do that would mean that they wouldn't go forward. The assumptions we used quickly, we assumed there was going to be continued slow decline in the enrollment. Nothing, we're not saying 10%, 20%, we're just saying if you look at the trends, which I'll show you over the last 5 years, and if you look at the current population, it's just slowly going down. There's going to be continued pressure on districts and schools to become more efficient, to maintain their lower costs, and the size of the staff resource pools will slowly decrease. And challenge, and actually Mount Vernon is the most obvious example, is really challenged right now as they go to reduce the cost. They're at half people, 3/4 more outside contract work and things like that. And, that impacts the quality of the education. So if you look at, on this chart, just 2 simple little charts there. One, just what's been the change in the population over the last 5 years in each of the schools. This is directly from the state website. I'm not saying the numbers are accurate, I'm just saying they're from the state website for 2011-12 year through 2015-16. And you can see in Mount Vernon, the population dropped 17%, Amherst 10%, Sauhegan 3%, and at the state level, 5%. Actually, surprisingly, some bigger drops in the teacher population, teaching and instructional support. On the other side of this, if I went and I looked at the current enrollments, and I know they'll be updated next week, the official date, but this was in last year. If you looked at what will constitute the freshman or the Sauhegan population based on the people that are in the system today, that we would go from an 831 population this past year to somewhere in the neighborhood of 650. Frankly, it could be 675, it could be 700, it could be 725. More than likely, it's going to go down, and by a number that says some other things are going to have to accompany that change. When you combine all of them, if each of the districts approaches this consolidation, because you've been consolidating and you're in the middle of more, to do it individually is probably the least efficient way to do it. You can't balance resources, you can't share resources, physical or teaching resources. So at this point, our recommendation is to continue with the consolidation into a single district. It was the approach endorsed by all of the principals. All of them seen benefits, significant benefits associated with them. There were some caveats about the way you might do things and all, but that was mostly at the grammar school level. It increases the ability to manage through the consolidation. If it happens faster or if it happens slower, you can deal with that. Right now, I think, or we all think, that trying to do it in 3 different times it sort of makes it difficult for everybody involved. It would give you the district, the newer district, the ability to improve, maintain the educational process, more effectively plan, implement the advance and the unite agendas, which call for more coordination, more consolidation. And while it leads to some immediate small reductions, there are longer term, depending upon if you change the way you do certain things, like buildings and grounds and maybe special ed and things like that, the ability to save much bigger dollars. So short term, modest savings, same as before, nothing really changed in this area, 300 to 600K, some SAU staffing, small teacher workforce, building and grounds, some preschool with the ability to consolidate some of the Mount Vernon requirements. Longer term, as I said, doing things differently, some additional savings in the 2 areas I mentioned with significant potential with special ed, but that would have to be something that the district decided that if they were to do some things in-house versus sending people out, you're saving out of town tuition as well as transportation and things like that. And also the ability to manage the ups and downs of special ed more easily too. The big elephant is teacher salaries and benefits. We have 3 different environments. Getting to that would take time. It would likely not be done in the first year of the new district. You'd likely see the union or one or more unions look to consolidate, so that would be a vote. One way or another, it would be a vote. And it would just be done, and then the outcome of that and how it was handled would determine it. So we didn't take any position on that other than say it's there, and it is something that, depending upon what an interim or implementation committee was set up, that is something that they would end up dealing with, not our committee. More effective education. The big thing by all of the principals was the ability to share resources. The potential, I remember at the meetings this past spring, at the high school, there was, well, how come you cut the Spanish 5 class? Okay, well, maybe you wouldn't have had to cut that if you were able to share, a resource from the middle school with the Spanish teacher, what could then come over and teach it. Or what about somebody that wanted an advanced math course or was ready for an advanced science course that was in the middle school? Maybe they could now go over and take it at the high school. Opportunities like that. The one we just saw with the STEM center here, but yet we have this facility over here. All of those things are, in some cases, very difficult to do because of some, legal union issues, and in other cases, have a lot of administrative headaches associated with them, so they're probably avoided as opposed to impossible to do. I said special needs, the ability of special needs to have a coordinated staff that could maybe follow an individual as they went through the system. Somebody who's coming from Mount Vernon could maybe get the same support individual as they get into the middle school, or somebody in the middle school maybe going to the high school. Better coordination of the curriculum. You've already done a very good job at that. People are working very hard at that, but there are still some elements that may be made easier by that. And then there was brought up, just again, these are ideas, but the ability for some Amherst students maybe to attend the village school. If they're on that end, so you have more of a neighborhood school concept for some of the things, so that people on that side of the town, maybe they would go up there and, and also level classroom sizings too, because of that. So some things came out. These are all from the principals, and there are other examples which we could discuss if we go to the staffs. Okay. What this would mean is that starting sort of now or next month, we would start to communicate. Our thoughts were, you'll see it in the plan, so actually I won't do that right now, how that would work out. It'd be we would expect that this proposal would be part of the information session and then the deliberative sessions for all of the districts. It would vote April through June, April 17 through June of 18. There would be a new district planning committee where a number of decisions would end up being made or proposed. Like how the board might get constituted for a new board, what happens, how we're going to handle some of the things like the labor, or they would end up getting much more involved in that. So there is 13, 14 months of planning that would be associated with it, because the new district would not become operational until the fall of 18. Calendar, we're looking to finalize the calendar in the next month or so. Test messages, part of tonight is test messages. We're going to have some questions and answers, comments, at the end of this. Same if we go to the individual boards. And then as we start going a little bit more public with some of these things, to understand, as I said, people's concerns, what would they suggest, what would they like to hear, come back, and all of that is potential input in terms of the warrant article and getting people comfortable with what could be done, should we move ahead. So there's the school boards, there's the leadership team. Look to publish something in the Citizen as of November 1st, saying, hey, there's a proposal floating now. You may want to start to attend some of these forums to learn more about it. Follow the kindergarten kind of a model, so to be as open public as we can. Listen to people's concerns, try and address them. Tell them how we anticipate it could be handled, and then separate out what can be done now versus what might have to be done by the implementation committee. We would come back here sometime in January, maybe likely before then, to sort of finalize, talk about the warrant articles, because you will have to make a decision, each board, in terms of, am I going to place this as part of my, a warrant article on my ballot. The deliberative sessions, and then a vote in March. That's it. David.
Right. Is the warrant article an all or nothing thing? In other words, every school board must approve it or none?
So we talked about that. I guess we sort of ended up without trying to go through all of the options, saying that's probably the way it needs to be done. I think somebody, for instance, if Mount Vernon didn't want to do it, it wouldn't be fair to go ahead on this proposal with everybody else. So yes, the way we're envisioning it right now, yes. that's something, frankly, that might come up as we went through the fall, and through comments here or there. I don't know, but the way we're thinking, yes, it is. It goes on each of the ballots, written such that if Mount Vernon approves, but the Amherst School District doesn't, and Sauhegan does, then it doesn't go forward.
But is there a scenario where Mount Vernon and Amherst could approve and Sauhegan doesn't, or some other combination?
That's a different effort. That was one of the efforts that we rejected. That was also one of the reasons that the warrant committees were put in place, to see whether Amherst and Sauhegan wanted to form their own co-op.
Amherst and Mount Vernon.
And the feedback is no.
Amherst and Mount Vernon.
Excuse me, Amherst and Mount Vernon. Yes.
I was glad to hear that at first cut all four of the principals agreed. One thing that I was wondering, you said everybody came back with comments, both positives and negatives. Is there a way we can get maybe a summary of?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
I'd love to know. I see the positives, but I don't know enough about the details of the day-to-day stuff.
I would say.
It'd be nice to know the issues that need to be addressed.
I would say there were no negatives. I would say that what I would now reclassify as cautions, as opposed to negatives. Say, you got to be careful how you do this. And it was, I think it was actually only Jerry that said, you got to be careful about the classroom capacity at Wilkins. We already have 4 mods there, and if you think you can bring somebody down to this and that, I think that was the gist of it. But other than that, other than Jerry, who legitimately raised those cautions, all the comments were positive with, again, John Shettinger seemed significant benefits to him and the school and things like that, recognizing the value of the school to the village, but at the same time, he's challenged more than anybody with the staffing issues. Yes?
You indicated that basically in terms of savings, there is none. There's something. In terms of savings, there's no real significant savings, which I thought was the major driver in the first place, that there would be a lot of savings. I guess the other thing that is a concern were, we spoke with the 4 principals. Have you had any kind of study group to speak with people around in any of the communities or any of the districts involved, or have you even spoken with the teachers? Do the teachers have anything to say about this?
The cost is, the charter as we saw it was, maybe it started out as, it was district configurations, and it was cost and we always from the beginning involved the sort of, how does this sort of affect the educational environment of it. So, second one was, have we talked to the community? We have not, because we were not sure what the proposal was. So rather than go out and start raising all kinds of concerns like we're going to fire all the people in Mount Vernon, which maybe was a rumor we heard was already started, and other things, we said, let's get it to the point where we want to reaffirm what we've done and that we're comfortable with that, and then bring it here and say, okay, now the next step is to go back to you and start to address individual questions, like we met to some degree with some of the Amherst folks as part of the Amherst warrant issue, and they wanted to have a conference and understand what we were doing and what they might do. And so there was already some questions back and some concerns raised in that. We would hope to do the same with Sauhegan Board and the same with the Mount Vernon Board. Our intent after that is absolutely going to go out, and that can happen, a little bit, I would say, more towards the latter part of October, because we know this isn't perfect, and we know there's a lot of the concerns of the parents would be represented by the board. So why not get a first pass at those to think through, and then go to them so we don't scare people unnecessarily because we haven't thought through. The teachers, no. There was not an intent to avoid them. It's almost part of the same answer, but we think we got some portion of the feedback. I realize through the principals, but that's not the same as talking to the teachers. We would expect, because we did talk about them, that a lot of the teachers would have questions about, well, what's going to happen to me and what about my contract and stuff like that, none of which we can answer because we don't understand what that environment would be. We did look in trying to get some information from the SAU Council on what it is and all, but it's, that would clearly be the biggest task that the implementation group would have to deal with. So I don't know whether that, can I get to most of it?
We got more questions later. Thank you.
Yes.
So you said that, the board structure and stuff like that won't be answered until after the vote.
I think one of the things we would expect to hear, because one of the things we said, well, I sort of immediately said, so if I were on Amherst, I'd be concerned about, well, how do the interests of the Amherst School Board now get represented on the new board, and how is that going to be handled? Same with Mount Vernon. And so we sort of figured around, okay, maybe you change the constitution of the board to include more people. You can't really go elect people that I'm running for the Amherst School District representative on this new board or something like that. So by the time, two more points and then I'll stop. By the time this would actually get implemented, I think 2/3 of the boards will be replaced. So if this were to get voted in, the new people running could run on a platform that included the new district as part of what they were running. But last that comes back to, that's something that we can talk about. We could defeat it. We could make recommendations and all, but it isn't something that this committee would determine. It would be that implementation committee.
I guess the reason why I ask is I think that depending on what the end result was, I feel as though if people, I'm concerned about the vote not passing, either because they don't know what it's going to look like, so they're concerned, or people thinking it's going to go one way, but then after they vote, it changes. We get a lot of very angry citizens because they weren't given the true answers to what it was going to be.
So that was one of the questions we have dealt with and didn't come up with an answer. Mm-hmm. That is good feedback for this, because I don't know legally what we can do or not do. So next time we come back, we'll maybe have a better answer for that question.
That'd be good.
I can tell you some others. Mount Vernon's going to say, well, what about the village school? How long is that going to be open? And those types of questions. So we have tried to thought through, and I guess when we could start to send out the FAQs, you'll get a sense of what are we trying to do with it. Maybe we can do that sooner, or we'll have to talk. But those are exactly the things that we're trying to understand and visit, because you're right. We wouldn't want somebody to feel like they were deceived, and we wouldn't want somebody to not vote positively. If they don't like it, then that's fine, but not vote positively because they didn't understand or they didn't see what they were looking for. And so I would just say those are the things that we want to hear back tonight, as well as when we visit the boards. Here's what I think, but you better not go anywhere unless you get an answer for this kind of thing. Because, I personally feel, I think most of the people on the board, that this is a good thing. And I think if you even have any faith in the numbers, it's going to get more and more challenging for the two towns to deal with it and maintain the quality. And this gives the towns the ability to manage through this, I think, much more easily with a bigger pool of resources, and to coordinate, strategy and deployment of those resources. Okay, yep. David, again?
Yeah, Frank, I'm concerned about, in general, I think it's a good idea. But I'm concerned about the span of control kind of issues that you alluded to. And I think about what we have on the agenda for Sauhegan in our board meetings, and very little of that overlaps into another school district, what currently is another school district.
Yep.
And we spend, I don't know, Tim's laughing at it. We spent too long going over a lot of things that are very germane to Sauhegan itself. And I just can't imagine, I can't imagine, or maybe I can imagine, what bad it would be if we went a different way and weren't able to deal in the depth, and there I think a lot of complications. So I'd like to see some way of addressing those issues with, some sort of an organization structure that would help support that kind of thing. I don't know what it is.
No, I understand.
I don't want to propose anything.
We specifically thought about that as well. And is there some interim thing, that non-elected but official, in some cases I'll say PTA organizations, very strong ones, have sometimes play that kind of a role. There may be a principal and the board wants to have an advisory, committee is another term that's frequently used to go do that. I mean, I think for sure, given that we're going from an environment where the boards are very involved with the schools, to just back away from that is likely going to be very uncomfortable for not just you, but a lot of other people. Yes?
To address that, I think one of the ideas in the past may be that boards like this will just have more frequent meetings. Maybe it wouldn't be a once a month meeting. Maybe this entire board would have to get together multiple times. I think I just remember hearing that at one point when this was discussed.
Whatever the solution ends up being. Sorry.
No.
I was just going to say, whatever the solution ends up being, I'm comforted by the fact that 98% of the school districts in the state are able to do it.
Yeah.
And so the question is that, whatever discipline we have to employ during our discussions or whatever model we come up with, we know it's possible. As a matter of fact, what's most unlikely or improbable is what we're doing today. So I think it's I share your concerns.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm just comforted by the fact I know that can be done.
Well, there wouldn't be a need for an SAU board meeting.
Yeah. So you still have 2 nights a week, is that what you're saying, Amy?
Yes, Mary Lou?
So I actually, I admire your aggressive timeline because it often takes way too long to get changes made. It seems like, especially in the educational community, but I do echo some of the concerns. I feel like it's really almost too aggressive. We're already going towards the end of September. Our Sauhegan board meeting is the first week of October, and frankly, I've been sending probably 4 emails out to our board members asking if there, and I know I shared this with you, Frank, asking if there are agenda items that we can push off until November, because we already have what's looking to be a very long October meeting without even having the Streamline Committee come in and present or answer questions. And it seems like there are a lot of questions, let alone, the contracts, the land ownership, all of that stuff that would need to be worked out. And I feel like it's hard for voters or even boards to vote without answers to these questions. And I'm not sure that it's even fair to ask you guys to have these answers. A lot of people would have to be involved to get the answers to these questions. And then we have schools unionized and non-unionized, as you know, and so it just seems like it is really aggressive. And while I do admire that, I would hate to jump in or have us jump in and I guess the other thing I would comment on is along with trying to deal with the contracts, whether it be dissolving contracts, dissolving boards, reestablishing them, is it union, non-union, the land, the teachers, getting the teachers communicated to. Then you mentioned that, this would help the Unite, I think, and the Unite Advance implement there, but I don't think any other pillar other than the Streamline Committee is meeting, and my feeling, and I shared this at the 4 chairs meeting, is I feel like we need to get more under our belt as far as common assessment and grading, as far as common language and sharing resources that we can share now, where contracts don't, disallow it. I feel like it's going to be hard to do all the things that are required to combine districts, all the things I mentioned previously, like the land and contracts and all that, and at the same time try to implement changes like on the advanced and Unite Committee. So that's why I feel like it's a little aggressive, but just...
No, we talked about it. So I'm going to speak for myself, but I think Drew came around. There's no reason to wait. Not everything you just said, unless you go do it, is going to remain the same. And my biggest fear is if we walk away and you say you don't want to do it, I'll be standing here or somebody else will be standing here from a year from now, and nothing will have been done. Okay. So meanwhile, all those things you talked about are better implemented in a combined district than they are in 3 separate districts. So I can't speak for, Adam would end up with a lot of those questions, but I think a lot of the legal issues are more straightforward than you think. They would also be part of the implementation year, not part of, you have to vote on the concept, not on the implementation deals, and can somebody do that? And can we implement this, and are we better off in that environment than the environment we are in right now? And if you agree, We still want to hear what are the issues, absolutely, and address all of those. But, I mean, I don't see any reason to wait. And I think Peter was a little bit wavering and then came around to say, let's go for it, because nothing will change unless we sort of go do it.
You have from March 2017
Yeah.
to July 2018.
To do the details, right.
To work that out.
But the question is about, well, what happens with the land, okay? And like some of the fields are owned by Amherst, right, the Amherst School District. Well, if they join it, then they become part of the new district. I mean, so we talked through some of those. So some of them are very straightforward to address, and others aren't. The biggest one is the unions. And what would happen likely the district would be formed for the first year. Everybody would sort of be grandfathered under their existing contracts. Somebody would apply to sort of say, I want to represent the teachers. There'd be a vote. The new board would negotiate with them, and in year 2 or whatever, they'd agree. I mean, so the process is known. You can't change that because you can't negotiate until it's there. So, that's another big one. It's a big unknown, but that's it. I mean, but if there are others, that's it. So, that's just my feeling about moving forward. And I think others. Yes.
So, one issue, more of the July 18 timeline that I have a little bit of concern about is we would have to vote on that budget on
In March.
Yeah.
This March or
No,
next March.
Yeah.
So that would be, we would have no answers made. Like really, there would be no real answers of how the consolidation would really happen based on your timeline, because they would have from this March to October, because the first budget comes out October-ish. So they would have 6 months to really answer a lot of these questions, because that whole budget season is going to be spent figuring out,
Yeah.
the budget that the boards are presented will have to be on the new budget, or the new consolidation. So really, I think that I'm concerned about that July 18 because of that.
Okay.
I mean, I think there's some other, there's a lot that needs to be answered.
Okay.
So that might be a concern as well.
Okay. First, remember they're developing one budget and not 4.
True, but they're developing one budget on something that we don't know what it is.
You know what it is. I mean, I don't want to minimize it, but you have 4 budgets right now. You add them all up, and that's likely, at a very, very high level, that's your new budget. Okay, and then you look at some cost savings and some elimination, because in that first year, not a whole lot's likely to go change. Except you have it. So, yes. I mean, Adam can take but I don't see that as a big, I absolutely see the concern about the voice of who's going to represent my school, my interests, and my kids, and that absolutely. And the budget, that's not a budget issue, that's a organizational issue. But the budget I don't think is, and Adam, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't even see that as a, yes, no, you don't want to answer?
I don't know which way to shake to say that.
Yeah. Yes.
Just to clarify, I thought I heard you say that for at least the first year, you would go in with the existing teachers' contracts as they are now. So if that's the biggest obstacle to overcome, you essentially have an extra year to get that ironed out. You don't need that in place for the 2018.
That's correct. You would end up going forward with that, and then, right, it was the biggest obstacle in terms of what does the new district look like 2 or 3 years out. I mean, your compensation of benefits is by far and away the biggest item. Right?
Peter or Adam, could you clarify, because I don't think that's accurate, that the teachers' contracts can even legally stay the same unless they petition to the labor board or something?
I can certainly explain that. It's not a quick answer, but the way
Mike, no one's going to hear you.
Stand with Frank. I don't want to be on the record.
So, if consolidation were to be passed by voters and have an active date of July 1, 2018, then all of the groups of people that would be represented by a bargaining unit or could be represented by a bargaining unit, teachers, support staff, paraprofessionals, if 30% of any one of those groups requests recognition with the Public Employee Labor Relations Board for recognition, then that would force two things. It would force the opportunity for a union vote to be officially a union under the new employment status under the Sauhegan Cooperative. And second, it would take any pre-existing collectively bargained contracts and would put them into status quo, period. So what that really means is a teacher from Amherst or a teacher from Mount Vernon, if that 30% vote happens to seek the recognition process or to start the recognition process, then a teacher from Amherst or Mount Vernon, they would be entitled to have their last contract in their pre-existing district be their new contract until such a time as a new collective bargaining agreement is either passed or defeated in the new Sauhegan Cooperative. So a teacher making $65,000 in Amherst would have opportunity to maintain a $65,000 contract in the Sauhegan Cooperative, even though Sauhegan didn't have a union, doesn't have a union at the time that the cooperative is expanded, until such a time as that union issue is sorted out. It's confusing, but I can answer questions about that.
Are the three contracts, I don't know what the dates of the three contracts, are they coterminous? Are we fortunate enough to believe that they're coterminous?
No. And there's...
What's that?
Doesn't really matter.
Well, it would be helpful if it was, I'm just saying, but what you're saying is, so each of the contracts got to review and try to become coterminous at some point, right? So we may want to negotiate one more year and one contract or something like that.
Well, that's a decision for each of your individual boards to make in the interim process. What would effectively happen is if the cooperative was expanded, all of those teacher employment relationships with those pre-existing districts would end, and there'd be opportunity for them to be brought into the Sauhegan Cooperative, at which point that vote for union recognition would take place. If 30% pass it of the whole group, not just the old pre-existing group, the whole group, then they would have their old contract be honored. And it doesn't exactly matter when their old contract ended or whether they were coterminous or not.
Same as it is now.
Yes, until such a time as either a new contract that recognizes everybody is passed and ratified by the school board and by voters, or a union organization vote is defeated.
I just want to say, just point out a couple things. I guess, from my perspective, when I listen to this and then I say we're going to go, we need way more, there's got to be more detail, especially from Mount Vernon. And maybe next meeting when we come, there'll be more discussion there. It just seems like it's rather light on the detail. And we have significant cultures in the high school with teachers and people, and then, our town and school. Yep. I think then you're really embarking on a thing to combine all that, and they're so different. And, we start off by saying declining enrollment, so I have issues with just taking state data for that. I mean, Amherst and Sauhegan are both up this year, right? So, that data is a little weak at best right now. And yes, there's decline, but where's that floor, and what does that look like if you assume that there's going to be some bottom out number? I don't think it just keeps declining.
The data says it keeps declining. I mean, it's the data. I mean, yes, absolutely. There will be some up years and down years.
Presented from state a while back that said that it kind of leveled out for a while. Can't remember where that was from. But I'm concerned about. It's just like we sell. Okay, we have declining enrollment, so we have to address that. But then the next statement is, but there isn't any real savings. So those two are sort of a bit mixed messages. And then there's a whole lot of soft benefits about the educational benefits. And yes, I agree, there's some mobility, and Mount Vernon would benefit from some of the teachers, but then, where's that mobility boundary? Because the qualifications of the teachers are now involved, so maybe it's just K through 6 mobility, right? So there are other issues there, and it just keeps, you want to dig in more, and then there's just representation, as a small town. how are we going to have our say, and how's that new body going to be governed? And I just feel like there's just so much there that we have to spell out much clearer, in my opinion.
I guess one of the things I've been saying in an early question is that New Hampshire has the distinction of being the only state in the union that has the greatest representation per capita. And what's being proposed here potentially takes that away. And I agree in some respects that each of the current districts have their own personality, and there are issues that are important to those districts. And there are some things that fall on the floor today. What happens when you combine? I mean, there's a greater potential that now things that are important to each of those districts, each of those communities, could potentially fall on the floor. So I guess I'm concerned about the representation, and I'm not, it just seems to be outside or different than the New Hampshire model of representation.
I apologize, I'm not sure I understand the New Hampshire model of representation.
We have greater representation in New Hampshire per capita. There are more representatives per capita in the state of New Hampshire.
So the two U.S. representatives are?
No, we're talking about the House of Reps at the state level.
Okay, I'm sorry.
What is per capita? Legislative body.
Yep. All right, so I will be contacting everybody, and I would say we probably have anticipated maybe 4 out of 5 of those questions. Not that we have answers, and would look to see what are the answers. But thank you. Yes.
I just wanted to make a comment that I also agree. I would like to see more details too. I think everybody wants to see more details, but one of the things that really concerns me is I do believe those enrollment numbers. I've been looking at them for 5 years. We've been looking at them for 5 years. They pose a really big challenge to us. That data, with all due respect, that data is about as good as you're going to get. I think we've been saying up levels of the Sauhegan Board and others that a smaller high school is coming. A smaller high school is coming. Even with all the people moving into town. Those are mostly younger kids, and what we're seeing in the middle school is 650 kids. So the smaller it gets, the more difficult it is to preserve the breadth of opportunity that we actually have here at the high school. I am concerned about that. So there might be some additional data. The point of my comment is there might be some additional data you can look at. I know that there was just recently some data published that says that the projected population in New Hampshire by 2040 will be 1.4 million people, which is up, but that most of those gains are going to be people over the age of 65. That population will be about 450,000. It's about 150,000 now. So that means we're going to have to see a contraction in the younger population under 65, which kind of confirms what we're talking about. The younger population in New Hampshire is really dropping off. So that might be something, that census data is available. Maybe you can build that into your assessment in the future.
I'm not on Sprice. I will send out my email address, and so anybody, please forward the questions as we have. So the next time we come back, we can hopefully address a lot of them or pick up from the boards. Mary?
I just want to. I think when we look at projections, we have to be careful because I think like the data even maybe you're talking about, Jim, is looking at the age of the population right now, and I can't say this for sure, but I don't know that if you can either. And if everyone who's, our age now working, so to speak, stays in New Hampshire, then yes, in 10 years, there might be, a certain percentage higher of elderly population. But that's assuming that the people that are here now stay and that younger people don't move in. That's how I take that data, and that goes against even our New Hampshire tax structure. I mean, think about it. We have no income tax, which is a big draw here. So what is the draw for age 65 and above to move into New Hampshire? So that's where I think they're not looking for a big influx of 65 and older people to move into New Hampshire. It just, in my opinion, the tax structure in New Hampshire doesn't even support that because of no income tax. And we are seeing through the real estate agents we've talked to more and more young families moving in, as you said. So I think we have to be careful. 10 years ago, we thought we were going to need a new school, to build a new school. So it's hard to we had that, the NEASC or whatever, and, I know that it was looked at by some people like Bible, and here we are not needing another school.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what to say. Those numbers are just the enrollments, period. Not my numbers, they're the state numbers. And to go from a projected class of 831 last year to what's in the middle school and the Mount Vernon Village School right now, unless the populations are going to explode, that number looks like 650 in 5 years, okay? So, even if it's 750, that's still a 15-20% drop. So, I mean, I don't see the denial about the decline.
Yeah, I'm not critiquing your numbers. I'm just
No, I know that. I'm just saying
projecting 10 years out.
But I guess even if that number drops, how other than the savings from the combined resources at the SAU, how does that? What are we doing here that's going to help that number? The class, they're already merged. The two towns are already together in that school, right? So there's no moving around and rebalancing. None of that benefits there. The teacher mobility doesn't work from K through 6 to high school. So specifically, how does the streamline help that lower number?
I should have left the other 3 years because I went through grades 1, 2, and 3 at Mount Vernon, and they declined further from the grade 4 number you see there. So that number drops to 151 at the top, drops to maybe 130. So, I mean, that's just what's in the schools. And so, to answer Mount Vernon is going to have to figure out more, have teachers, contract this or that. I mean, because either that or look to consolidate more with Clark Wilkins. I mean, I don't know, but I know that as your resource base in terms of dollars and things like that shrinks, or you're going to raise your tax rate, you're going to have difficult problems to deal with. And we're saying this a big part of this, in addition to significantly maybe improving, according to the principals, the whole education quality. So that's why. I mean, and you don't have to do it right away either. This is to get ready to do those things. But I've taken, so much for 15, 20-minute topics. But.
Okay. No more questions from the board.
Right.
Thanks. Jean, you had a question?
Sure.
Go right ahead.
I really do appreciate the work that the committee did on this. And I also really appreciate the thoughtful questions that board members have asked tonight, because my concern when I first heard about this was the speed with which this was happening. I actually spoke with several members of the community who believe that if changes of this magnitude are going to occur, they need to occur over time, maybe rolled out in the 3 to 5 year increment. And I really think the devil obviously is in the details, and you all have really just barely scratched the surface in getting your questions answered. And I think it's obvious that you are very responsible in the way in which you're approaching this, and that I would encourage you not to rush and to take your time, so that all of the stakeholders, certainly you have buy-in with all of them. Obviously right now they have not reached out to all the stakeholders, and I think that you were sort of putting the cart before the horse. So I hope that you will take your time.
Thank you. Okay, Frank, one more.
Yeah, just one more comment, because there was one of the other questions that we were almost asked immediately was, does that mean the kids in middle school and the village school are going to have to call the teachers by their first name? And so I just want to point out that the culture in the schools is dictated by the principals, right? And so we were not anticipating that, and that was not going to be an edict that from now on everybody would be their first name. Anyway, little evidence.
Go ahead.
Just a 30-second thing, just to put another perspective. The one thing that I do hear from this is that the quality of the education will improve. It will make it easier to do certain things. So we don't have to beat them. This is a very unscientific poll, but there are 6 young engineers at work that just bought houses, all 6 sporting veterans. 2 that I know that are actively looking for houses. They're looking in Bedford. And I asked why, and they said it's because of the school. So yes, we do a lot of great things here, but the perception, because people look at scores, they look at other things, the perception is the school needs to improve. If that would help improve the schools, I would recommend doing something quickly. Because if you don't do anything, then the declining enrollments become a self-fulfilling prophecy. People who are not in town have a negative perception of the school. I tried to tell them they're wrong, but I can't change that. People look at the test scores, they look at all those things. If this will help, do something. Don't wait.
So I've been grabbing the mic for half an hour, so I promise I'll take half a minute. So I thank you to the committee for sure. I'll take you back to last March when both towns voted to explore this possibility. That is all we're doing right now, is exploring it, taking input from the boards next month and probably November from the community. This group physically and literally has no power. The only power rests with you guys. And what they've done is volunteered a whole bunch of time to put some things together, and they will continue to do that. We have a lot of things to answer. There's no question. So I thank them and understand that we are just beginning exploring this whole concept as we go forward. Okay? So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, 2 minute recess? Okay. All right, we'll take a 2-minute break, then we'll come back in for another presentation.
Are we going to do Barrett and then go back to some of the other pillars?
Go back to some of the information later.
There was articles on both Mount Vernon and Amherst School District ballots.
What?
I'm just going to mention.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you very much. No, it's okay.
Vacation day in the afternoon. I have a vacation day tomorrow afternoon.
That's right, you're going to New Jersey.
I am, yeah. I just added up how much
I'm going to speak for all of them. You can't go with my question.
I just added up how much money this is costing. It's going to be $400 for me to go to New Jersey. Between parking, the flight, and the pet sitter. Like, I know, and I'm like, why did I do this? But I feel forced to. How do you not show up? We have our agenda planning, so I will see you tomorrow. And then I have a PACE meeting at 7, and then I'll head home. My PACE meeting is until noon.
Thanks a lot. I'll see you tomorrow.
Well, no, I'm just saying.
Cleaned it up a little bit.
Yeah, it's probably I stole it from somebody else. So
Well, thank you for giving it to me. It's going to help.
it's very, the file is incorrect. You also incorporated that's right. A lot of things that sometimes we don't take them in good business and stuff.
Well, it's hard because you don't.
Yeah, I know.
You don't want to put too much, but you don't want to.
You're doing a very nice job.
Thanks.
Boy, got it really good.
Thanks. I guess I've taken a lot of notes in my time.
Good job.
Thank you. Well, I came from, I worked
Oh, really? It was great for you then.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, dealing with talking to the Fed. So, I worked in risk management. I worked on Basel. So it's just all the rules and like proving every single thing. How are we doing this at the bank? No, regulatory.
So you were
No, I didn't work on that. Totally different. No, always, Basel's like capital adequacy. So, from the whole mortgage. Well, yeah, Basel is, but then each sort of, each federal regulator kind of does an interpretation, but Basel is the worldwide regulatory body.
Okay, folks. So thank you for your patience and your questions, and we've got a lot of work to do with just that one concept before we talk about the policy. But I'm pleased to introduce Barrett Christina from the New Hampshire School Board Association. I've known Barrett for a number of years. Barrett saves us a lot of money. I probably call him more than anyone. He's a red phone on his desk and it's connected to my desk. It's been very helpful to us over the years. I asked him to come and some specific topics. We can talk about the roles and responsibilities of board members, but mostly it's to answer, I think we talked about 7:45 as a time to be done tonight. Questions that you might have, the brain questions for board members that you could ask Barrett. So he'll do 5 or 10 minutes of going through the material you got in your packet, and then answer questions you might have to end up. So, Barrett, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you to the SAU-39 Board for having me down. I appreciate the opportunity to come down and have a chance to meet you all and a chance to provide some training, see some familiar faces. David, Mary Lou, it's nice to see you again as well. You should have the document. We've got it up on the screen, roles and responsibilities. As many of you probably know, a large portion of NHSBA's work is school board governance and assisting school boards with governance work. And what is that role between within the school board's purview and role and responsibility versus what's more within an administrator's purview, and what's the role of your superintendent, your building principals, and things of that nature. Given sort of the brief time that we have tonight, and I know you have a busy agenda and lots of other things going on, I'm going to go through this rather quickly. And rather than reading through, page by page or word for word, I'm going to try and focus on I guess, the major headings, if you will. Through any training that NHSBA does, whether or not it's roles and responsibilities, whether or not it's strategic planning, whether or not it's best practices, you're going to hear NHSBA time and time again talk about the school board's role as a policy-making board. That is, by and large, your first function and your primary function. And just so you're clear, that isn't necessarily NHSBA's best practice or NHSBA saying that. While it is, we find support and authority for that in a variety of New Hampshire laws. When we look at ED 303, whenever you see ED in front of a set of numbers, that stands for Department of Education rule, and there's 200, 300, 400, 500, all the way up to maybe 14 or 1,500, I think. But ED 303 is where we see the duties and roles of school boards, and we've got a couple examples on the board. Adopt policies necessary and desirable, so on and so forth. Adopt policies necessary and desirable, so on and so forth. I, adopt a rule. Well, in the context of school board governments, what's a rule? A policy, right? You guys adopt policies. J, establish a policy on sexual harassment. Likewise, we have various New Hampshire statutes, RSAs, and I'm sure you're familiar with most of these. We have a law on bullying that requires a school board policy. We have a law on concussions with student athletes that requires a school board policy. Use of restraints and seclusion requires a policy. Truancy, the background check the background check law just changed and required some policy changes to that as well. And these are just 4 or 5 examples that I picked out of laws that have changed within the last probably 4 or 5 years. If we were to go through all the statutes, there are multiple statutes that require school boards to adopt policies. And anybody that pays even close or even a moderate attention to the New Hampshire legislature, we know that their edicts to school boards are what? Adopt a policy. Whenever there's an issue with the New Hampshire legislature and they say, well, what's going on with school boards? How did this happen? Why did this happen? Their response is to make school boards adopt a policy. So that's what we do. I like to give the example, too, that when I started with NHSBA about 10 years ago, there were approximately 40 policies that were required by both state and federal law. Now we're up to about 50. So we see that's the flavor of the DOE, flavor of the New Hampshire legislature, adopt policies, put more of that responsibility on school boards. If we jump to page 2, I'm not going to go through all these, but I like to highlight this as the policymaking responsibilities for school boards. ED 306 is the minimum standards for public school approval. Basically, if you want a public school to be approved by the Department of Education and allow kids to come in and operate, these are all the things that you need to comply with. The full rule is, 120 pages or so. But C, the local school board shall adopt and implement written policies and procedures relative to 1 through 26. I won't go through the entire list. We'd be here all night. The good news for you is that we don't require school boards to adopt these policies on their own. You are not responsible for starting from scratch. NHSBA provides that service. For those of you that don't know, we send out twice yearly policy updates. Peter, I hope you got the one that came out maybe a week or so ago. If you didn't, let me know. Where when the legislature changes a law that requires a change to a school board policy, to an existing policy, or requires a new policy, NHSBA drafts that and sends it out to our members, sends out the template. So we don't have school board members trying to write a policy on recommending daily appropriate physical activity under number 17, or 16, how to track achievement of graduation competencies. We provide that service for you. What else do school boards have to do? And I really need to amend this. We put set the school district's budget. We wish it was just as easy as setting the school district's budget, right? But how many of your school boards have budget-related information at every single school board meeting? So we really need to amend that to say set the budget and then oversight of the budget as the year goes on, right? We don't just start the budget process in November, set it in January, send it to the voters in March, right? It's an ongoing process. Reports, spreadsheets, signing manifests, things of that nature. Hire a superintendent. That's something that you want to do as infrequently as possible, all right? As infrequently as possible. You all know that. I know Peter is well respected and well regarded, not just in this community, but statewide as being a wonderful educational leader. But that falls not so much on your local school boards, obviously, but on the SAU board. Coextensive with that, number 4, evaluate the superintendent. I go to a lot of school boards and I give this presentation and I say, number 4, evaluate your superintendent, and people say, we're supposed to do that? And I say, yes, as a matter of law. And again, not just NHSBA recommendations, there is a Department of Education rule. 303.01K, school board shall annually evaluate the superintendent based on written criteria established by the school board. And while I haven't seen Peter's contract, I've seen a lot of superintendent contracts in New Hampshire, and I guarantee you there's a clause in there that says you have to evaluate Peter annually. And what's the third legal basis for having to provide the superintendent with an annual evaluation? Let's go back to the first thing we talked about. What do you think you probably have on the books that directs the school board to do an annual evaluation of your superintendent? You've got a policy. Number 5, conduct hearings and serve as an adjudicative body. Hopefully your board is not doing this often, but from time to time the board has to sit as judge and jury, right? Teacher non-renewals, manifest educational hardship hearings for students, transportation bus removal issues. The bullying statute requires that the students may be entitled to a hearing before the school board. Those are the parent-student issues. Employees, dismissals, non-renewals, labor grievances under your collective bargaining agreement, and any other rights that a teacher may have. If there's a job action being taken against a teacher, chances are the board may have to serve as an adjudicative body at some point. A quick reminder of that, because the board may from time to time have to serve as judge and jury, you need to remember to keep yourself as unprejudiced as possible and as free as bias as possible. So when you hear something in the community, or you get a call from your neighbor about this issue or that issue, be mindful that, if it's a kid selling drugs in the bathroom or whatever it may be, you've got to step back. You're a parent and community member, and I imagine I can tell by looking at the faces, I bet a lot of you got on the school board because you have kids in the school, right? Be mindful of your role as a school board member now, and you're going to have to be as clean as possible coming into that process. Questions, comments? I know I'm ripping right through this. I know you've got some other things that we want to talk about as well, too. Collective bargaining. From time to time, the board will collectively bargain. Is it the high school that has the unique, you don't bargain, but you've got some sort of agreement or something like that? I know it's a unique situation in New Hampshire. I'm not aware of any other districts that have that sort of arrangement. But I know your paraprofessionals maybe, and I can't speak for Mount Vernon and the Amherst School District, but I assume they have bargaining units. Communicate with the public. Keep the public informed of board actions. Well, you had a pretty big presentation here just before my presentation. So in addition to those sorts of things, we've obviously got the right to know law, RSA 91A, that mandates public meetings, openness in government proceedings, public records, things of that nature. And you may have local board policies or directives that you give to your superintendent about, weekly newsletters and advertising things on social media, things of that nature. 8, strategic planning, long-term and short-term goals, plans, and objectives. Interestingly, this is a law that the board shall determine the educational goals of the district, determine long-range plans, and identify measurable and attainable short-term objectives. While NHSBA, again, recommends boards engage in strategic planning just as a best practice, there's a legal basis behind it. I don't know if your boards do collective or strategic planning. If you do, wonderful. If you don't, contact NHSBA. We work with some consultants. We've got some training materials that I can certainly pass along to the boards. Questions, comments, thoughts? All right. To compare and contrast that, I'm going to jump to page, I believe it's 7. I just want to contrast that quickly with the superintendent's role. We know that the board is a policy-making body, right? That's your primary function, based on best practices, based on state law, and based on a variety of other factors. What do your administrators do? They implement your school board policy, right? They implement your policy. What's the root of the word administrator? You administer, or giving, if you will. And again, it's not just a best practice. If we look at the pertinent Department of Education rules, ED 303 was rules of the responsibilities of the school board. ED 302, substantive duties of superintendents. And look at the highlighted language I have there. 302.02A, superintendent shall nominate all certified staff and appoint other employees in accordance with state law, rules of the state board, and local school board policies. D, responsible for the development and recommending to school boards an annual budget. Last phrase, in accordance with school board policy. So it's not like the superintendent is just sort of out there doing what he wants to do or she wants to do. There's guidance and direction for the superintendent. And your directives to the superintendent, if you will, the direction the board wants to go, the direction you want the district to go, how you want to see things done, is established through your policy. They're your marching orders, if you will, your guidance for your administrators on how you want to see things done. Mary Lou?
So can I just ask, just for clarification, because this has come up at our board, when you talk about the boards being responsible for strategic planning, long and short-term goals, and developing and measuring those goals, and then it talks about the superintendent being responsible for actually the educational plan, including curriculum, instruction, and assessment programs.
Yep.
So I guess my question would be, so how do we distinguish those?
Yeah. I distinguish long-range planning versus what, curriculum goals?
Yeah.
I mean, I think you have to look at strategic planning as the 30,000-foot view. Long-term planning, all right, this is where we are. We've got declining enrollments in this district in 2016. Where do we want to be in 2025? So we're going to be looking at, the strategic plan is going to be the 30,000-foot view of that. And the strategic plan is going to encompass everything within the school district. There's going to be a curriculum component. There's going to be a facilities component. There's going to be a technology component. There's going to be a communications component, communicating with the public. So, and then things will fit underneath that. If there's going to be a curriculum component of your strategic plan, you need to look at, well, what are the goals of the district? What are the realistic goals in terms of, how many kids are going to be proficient in math? How many kids are going to be college and career ready when they graduate from high school? And then the decision relative to how curriculum is selected, I think initially lies with your administrators, your professionals that are trained in curriculum instruction and assessment. But it's also a discussion with the board, and the superintendent presumably is going to bring recommendations. We studied this for 6 months. I'm recommending we bring forth everyday math. I'm just using that as an example. And then there's a discussion about everyday math in the school. What are the programs that you look at? Why did you pick this one? How many New Hampshire doing this? Does this align with Common Core? Does this align with what the state DOE is saying in terms of our competencies and our standards? What was the cost? And you have that discussion. Superintendent presumably brings forth a recommendation. I recommend that the board purchase this curriculum, adopt this curriculum, whatever it may be, and the board acts on that recommendation. And then ideally, these sort of things that are brought forward are going to fit within the columns, if you will, relative to the strategic planning and the half a dozen domains, for lack of a better word, that this community decides, it wants to put in the strategic plan.
So and what you just suggested, if I understand that, would be the check and balance presentation to the board, and the board is either in agreement or not in agreement.
Presumably, I don't want to necessarily speak for how it's done in this community. Every community is done a little bit different. Some boards act in the way or districts act in the way that I said. Other boards say, superintendent, we trust you to make the best decision. Inform us. Put in maybe a report to the board, and we'll have some Q&A about that. So the system, if you will, the protocol in each district is going to be a little bit different. But I think the check and the balance, I think, is an appropriate way to do that. And again, the board's manner to sort of oversee that process is going to be what? Your policy. What does your policy say about adoption and selection of curriculum? Anybody else? All right. So the superintendent, David?
Barrett, sometimes the timing of things makes the decisions that the board has, meaning yes or no decisions or whatever, advice or critique, the timing is more like a Russian election. There's only one candidate, or there's only one option, and we don't have a choice. You either say yes or no, but you don't but, the gray areas in between don't get explored or whatever.
Right.
How do you reconcile that? I mean, how do we deal with that? Because timing is several things. It's restrictions at the end that got to get done.
Right.
And it's also the fact that, sometimes you get into a situation where you really want to have more time to explore something.
Right, right.
You don't want to be ramrodded into something.
Sure. I mean, I first and foremost, I think that's a conversation the board has with the superintendent about whatever the particular curriculum or athletics, whatever it may be. Second, look at the process in which the topic or the issue sort of came to the board. Did it run through a committee? Was it something that needed immediate attention by the board? I mean, there are a lot of variables here, depending on what the issue may be or the topic before the board. But I think that can also be part of the Q&A when the board is considering a recommendation that's brought forth from the administration. And as always, if it's a recommendation, the board doesn't need to necessarily accept that recommendation, can send it back for further consideration. And if there's a time issue, I presume that Peter's going to let you know that it's a time issue. Anything else? No? All right. See how quick we can rip through this. So, superintendent's role, implement board policy. 2, nominate professional staff. The superintendent nominates all, and when we say professional staff, we generally mean positions that require certification. Your teachers, your BA, your principals, your specialists like reading specialists, guidance counselors, speech therapists, things of that nature. Superintendent recommends, I recommend we hire Sally as a second grade teacher. The board then acts on that recommendation. Right? And again, there's a legal basis listed in the 302.02. Nominate all certified staff and appoint other employees in accordance with state law, rules of the state board, and local school board policies. Appointing other employees generally relates to your non-certified staff, paraprofessionals, maybe your kitchen staff, custodians, things of that nature. What I want to jump to quickly, and then we can move on to some other issues. This is RSA 194C4. This is superintendent services. This lists all the things that the superintendent is responsible for. Each school administrative unit or single district school district shall provide the following superintendent services. And look at number 2. Governance, organization, structure, implementation of administrative services, including but not limited to. And I'll let you just read through it quickly. Payroll, recruitment of staff, development, review, and evaluation of curriculum, compliance with laws and regulations, pupil achievement, so on and so forth. I think it goes A through Q or something like that on the next page. Right? And I will guarantee you that everything on this list crosses Peter's desk probably every day. If not every day, close to it. I think that's a fair assessment. The other aspect that I want to highlight this to, A through Q, all these things, assignment of pupils, assignment of students. If we run back up to page, I think it's 3 or 2, board shall adopt and implement written policies and procedures relative to. It's not going to be an exact match, but I guarantee you that list of Peter's responsibilities is going to be pretty close to this list of policies that are required by law. And those responsibilities of the superintendent that are not necessarily directly related to the minimum standards, back on page whatever that was, 7 or 8, I guarantee you have policies on all of these things. And I know that, one, because I think I reviewed your policy manual a number of years ago. And 2, I've reviewed dozens and dozens and dozens of policy manuals from districts in every corner of the state. And by and large, they're pretty similar, maybe not the policy itself, but the content and number and topic of the policies. So I guarantee you have policies relative to payroll, cash flow, and bills. I guarantee you have policies about recruitment, supervision, and evaluation of staff. I guarantee you have policies relative to development, review, and evaluation of curriculum. I know that you do. So again, that's where the board's oversight comes in and where the board's input comes in. The policy aspect relative to how your superintendent is going to do things within the district. district and how the board wants to see the superintendent do things within the district. That's my 5 or 10, 15-minute roles and responsibilities. It could be a 2-hour presentation at some point. If you're that bored, you make a private appointment rather than take up the board's time to do that. Peter tells me that there may be some other questions that the board has relative to either roles and responsibilities or any other topics that you may be considering or just generally have questions on. I'm happy to, I made the trip down. I'm happy to stay at the board's pleasure and be of whatever assistance I can be.
There's one policy that you have as informational tonight that you're looking at, the transgender non-conforming policy. Barry, if you could talk a little bit about local, national law, that kind of thing, and there's nothing else we need to do tonight with that policy. It's just for you to look at it. The policy committee is giving you 2, the Oyster River one, which I think is used a lot in the state, and the Portsmouth one. The policy committee asked me to put them both in the packet. You're going to look at those. We're going to come back next month and talk a little bit more about it. In the meantime, I will be going to the PPC at the high school and other organizations with students and parents to talk about where we are and get that out so people can have any kind of input. So I'll give you kind of the update of where we are at our October SAU board meeting as well. Okay? And then probably more at the in each board meeting through October and or November.
Sure. Quick rundown of NHSBA's role in this, what the current state of the law is, and maybe some recommendations moving forward. If you read the union leader, you know that NHSBA's transgender policy came under some heat last spring, which was curious because our policy had been, sent out to districts a year prior, and NHIAA had had a transgender policy on the books for like 7 or 8 years, but whatever, we got in the crosshairs of the union leader, and they did what they did. So in 2015, April of 2015, NHSBA put out a sample policy relative to transgender students. As with all of our policies, they're not mandated by law. We have no authority to come into your school district and tell you to adopt this policy. We actually categorized it as optional. For those of you that are involved in the policy work, we have 3 categories of policies: required by law, recommended, optional. Our development of the sample policy came from member feedback, as they often do when we issue new sample policies. When I get a phone call from, a half a dozen, 10 districts in every corner of the state, you have a policy on transgender students, you have a policy on transgender students, maybe there's a need for it statewide. So anyway, we implemented the sample policy, categorized it optional, sent it out to districts. Right? Obviously, I'm sure you all read newspapers and keep up to date on current educational trends. This is an issue not just in New Hampshire but nationwide. Right? So, and we're familiar with laws in North Carolina and some court cases here and there. Currently, there is nothing in law, state law or federal law, that requires school boards to have a transgender policy. Not required by law, not required at all. Nothing in New Hampshire law, nothing in the state law. Was it this past May, the Obama administration, through the Office of Civil Rights, which is a branch of the United States Department of Education, issued a guidance letter. Not law, a guidance letter. All right? And they said, the Office of Civil Rights is going to be treating transgender student issues under Title IX, which is Title IX is your sexual discrimination statute. Federal law, your Sexual Discrimination Act. You can't discriminate on the basis of sex for schools that receive public money. You're probably familiar with that more in the sports context. If you've got a football team, you have to have a girls' basketball team, and so on and so forth. So anyway, the Obama administration said we're going to treat transgender student issues under Title IX, meaning you cannot discriminate against transgender students. And what does that mean? What does the discrimination look like? Separate bathrooms? I don't know. Treating them in any sort of disparate manner, making them use the nurses, the student using the
nurse's bathroom. You can see how these may, raise some questions of discrimination, for lack of a better word. Again, it wasn't law, it was OCR's interpretation of Title IX. And of course, the risk with that is, districts that knowingly and willingly violate federal law risk losing federal money. We hear that all the time, right? I'll be honest with you, I don't know any district that's ever lost federal money. There may be some instance somewhere. I've never heard of it happening. But anyway, that's the carrot and the stick approach. Since then, so the Obama administration issued this guidance document in, I think it was May of this past year. Various lawsuits ensued. One of the lawsuits was filed in Texas where they knew they would have a sympathetic court and a sympathetic judge, trying to block the Obama administration from implementing its interpretation of Title IX. The judge in that case issued an injunction, all right, meaning against the Obama administration, the Department of Education, the Office of Civil Rights, saying you cannot interpret, and you can interpret it, you cannot force Title IX in a manner in which you interpret it. So presumably there'll be a hearing. I know we'll get a different opinion. We've got different opinions from federal courts in Virginia. California will have a different opinion. At some point, we're either going to get federal legislation or we're going to get a Supreme Court case that clarifies transgender student rights under Title IX. And years. If it ever works its way to the Supreme Court, it will be years. So that's where the state of the law is right now. They're not required to have a policy. Many school districts are adopting these policies. I can think of probably 15 or 20 that I'm aware of in New Hampshire, and that means there are probably more I'm not aware of. Peter referenced Oyster River and Portsmouth. From my perspective, those are the two gold standard transgender policies. In the state, those boards have done significant work. They've worked with their lawyers. They vetted this. They had, I don't know if they had public hearings, but it wasn't like they just, put it on the agenda and passed it through. I know they worked through this quite significantly. So again, it's a matter for your board to decide whether or not you want to do. I will say this: every speech that I give on this issue, transgender issues aside, the board's primary responsibility, you have an obligation to keep every kid safe. White, black, gay, straight, male, female, doesn't matter. Your first priority is to keep every kid safe. Your second priority is to provide a safe learning environment where every kid that is entitled to walk through that door can come through and still receive an education. And I'll leave it at that and let the board do what it wishes with this policy. But just keep those two things in mind. I hope that was a clear sort of recitation of where we are in the law right now. Any questions on that, David?
Can that discussion be delegated by the board to community council or student council, the PTA?
I suppose.
Could it be?
Yeah, I was just saying, I suppose the board can delegate whatever it wishes. I mean, if you wish to, I don't know how you do your policy, or do you have it working through a committee, I presume. If the board as a whole wanted to bring forth student, PTA, whatever, you could do that. If you wanted to do that first through like a policy committee and bring in, the way I look at it with policy work, if you had a technology, if you were considering some sort of technology policy, you're going to bring in your IT director, right? Same concept. If you're going to looking at financial policies, you're going to bring in your BA to assist the policy committee. If you're looking about athletic policies, you're going to bring in the athletic director. Something that affects students and parents like this, if you want to bring them in, you're certainly, that's within your right to do that.
Well, maybe my question, you didn't answer my question. You can either delegate it and somebody else makes a decision, hands off, or you delegate it for advice.
Right.
Get some advice back. So the ultimate responsibility for safety, as you said, is the decision of the board. It's not, I can't delegate that to the Amherst School District, for example. I'm not an Amherst School District.
Sure. I don't think the board can delegate authority to adopt a policy. That rests with the board.
you can certainly seek advice and input of all these stakeholder groups, but the adoption of the policy has to rest with the board. Does that answer your question?
That answers the question.
All right. Mary Lou?
I think we have a community council at the high school, and that's considered a governing body.
Yeah.
And in the bylaws, it says they're not allowed to make policy. They're allowed to make procedure and make recommendations to the board. So I think that's what Dave is getting at, is that something like security cameras might affect the students.
Right.
Usually goes through community council, and they make a recommendation to the board.
Yeah.
So like you said, if it involves students, then, yeah.
In a case like this, I would seek their input more than anything else.
Yeah, exactly.
Because there are students in there in the
The
hallway.
same way you would with any other stakeholder group if you were looking at a policy that affected that group. Absolutely.
Eric, could you tell the board, what's your protocol for board members being in touch with you with a question?
Sure. Because NHSBA represents the board as an entity, we need to be mindful about inquiries that come into NHSBA. As a general practice, we ask that the inquiry come from either the superintendent or the board chair, with the presumption that the board chair has been delegated authority to contact legal counsel on behalf of the board or the district. If I get a call from somebody who is not the board chair, I'll listen politely, I'll take some notes. If it's something innocuous, like, can you send me a link to a statute, or do you have a sample policy on X, I'm happy to answer those questions. But if there are questions that involve sort of very fact-specific, nitty-gritty situations that either your board had last night or your board is, considering at this meeting tonight, I may need to respectfully decline giving advice or recommendations or an answer until we check with the board chair and the superintendent to make sure that the question or the inquiry has been authorized, for lack of a better word, by the board. And certainly not to cast aspersions or say that anybody, in this room would do this, but we've certainly found ourselves in situations, I found myself in situations before where, let's say, no good deed goes unpunished, where I've given advice to somebody, and it's either, I don't quite always get the full story from the person, because they took a vote last night that this guy didn't like, so he calls me the next day to try and undo it. I'm at the point now, I've been doing this long enough, I can usually sniff those out, and if it's somebody calling me with maybe some nefarious motives, I usually call the superintendent and say, Bob, school board member, call me, what's the real story? And I usually get at least, the other half of the story. So, I mean, and that is not intended to limit access to any NHSBA services by any means. We just ask the same way you have protocols in your district about, questions and concerns coming from the board and the superintendent or staff members or whatnot. We ask for the same sort of level of professional courtesy.
Okay.
Anything else? I'm here at the board's pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you very much. If there's any follow-up, certainly feel free to get in touch with Peter or your respective board chairs and get in touch with me. If I could just have 30 seconds, thank you very much for having me down. I appreciate the opportunity to get out and speak with board members and hear what's on your mind. It's easy for me to sit in my office in Concord and think of policies and, yeah, that sounds good, that doesn't sound good. But it's beneficial for me to come out and put names to faces, or faces to names, excuse me. And last, thank you for your continued membership in NHSBA. We are a member-driven organization, and without your continued dues and support, we're not able to provide services like this. So we greatly appreciate your continued support of NHSBA. If it can ever be of any additional help or services, by all means, let us know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The only remaining things for me under the informational items, in talking with Christine, she wanted to give you guys an idea of what the in-service day this year looked like. So that's in your packet. So take a look at all of the offerings that happened on that day, as well as some slides that she developed, one of which kind of listed. I think there's 9 or 10 items that she and others managed to do this summer. So quite a large breadth of work there. So take a look at that, and that's all I have.
Peter, you were going to sorry, John. You were going to recommend some conferences or whatever that we could attend. I thought I heard you say that at one point.
We had talked about, so the conference is ISTE. Maybe I'd mentioned that conference to you.
Yeah, but it passed.
It did pass. It's every year, and what we're doing right now. So I'll just be very quick. ISTE is the International Society for Technology Education. It's a very large conference every year. I happened to go this past summer. It was in Denver, 16,000 people, amazing, probably the best conference I've ever been to for lots of reasons that I can explain at some point. The people that went to ISTE are putting together a video, just like you saw tonight, for Makerspace. It'll give you lots of information about what we learned and what we saw, and I'll have a couple of anecdotal things that blew my mind when I heard these people talk about some things that are already happening in technology that are going to change the world. Matter of fact, one of the major speakers talked about the industrial age and other ages. He said that the next age that's coming, and we're almost into, is the age of digitalization, that everything is going to be digitized. But they're like 10 miles ahead of me. You'll be able to see that when you see the video. And Brad was there, and 7 or 8 other people from all of our districts, including Adam from Sauhegan and a few others. So we're going to have a video coming up. We're going to show the video the day of the PD session in November, but I'll show it to boards after that as well. But it's ISTE, capital letters. You can look on the site, check it out if you want to go next year. Unfortunately, it's in San Antonio, so if you're interested, we certainly can let you know.
In the summer, though.
Specifics are. It's in June usually. Yes. Yeah.
It's warm.
So should have been in Minnesota. But thank you for tonight. Barrett is a wealth of information. Call him, call us if you need anything like that. The policy committee is working, and also the piece with the Streamline Committee. We have a lot of work to do and a lot of input to get. So I appreciate your help.
Okay, wrapping things up. We have no non-public session, no action items, future agenda items. I kind of mentioned those. Review of meeting and adjourn. Anyone have anything to say before we go?
I did have a question regarding future items. Is it possible that we live in this time where our children can not only record anything or have conferences real time all over the world? Is it possible that we could have our meetings such that members that want to participate that can't physically be here, and if we can have the meeting because we have quorum, that they can also participate? Because I've tried this a couple of times through cell phones, and you guys, I can hear every third syllable, and maybe you can hear the same, and in some ways it reminds me of the adults in the Charlie Brown cartoons.
It's possible. How much you want to spend?
Well, why do we have to spend anything? Because our children aren't spending anything.
Because our children aren't attending group meetings.
My point is, our children...
You need a VTC, you need AV hanging from the ceiling, or some sort of, as well as a shared video of some sort at the very least. So,
right.
And all that costs tens of thousands. So the question is, do we want to do it?
What I'm suggesting is, because our children don't have tens of thousands of dollars, but they can have a group conversation with their friends all over the country, or all over the town, whichever the case might be, via the internet. Why can't we do that? I'm not suggesting we have a lot of money. We have to spend a lot of money because the capability is already amongst us.
Right. What I'm saying is, we would need to have it here so others can join in and listen to what's going on and see what's going on here, and then be able to raise a hand. And then we need some sort of moderator. You're absolutely right. The technology exists. I use it 10 times a day. The question is, I'm just saying it costs.
So I'm looking at Brad Freeman, who is just nodding to me saying yes. We're going to look into that this month, and we'll have information at the October meeting.
That'd be good. Thank you.
Because when Brad gets on something, it gets done. So. Thank you, Brad. So you're going to kill me for saying he nodded yes, right?
Or it doesn't get done, just in case.
Exactly. Or just in case. Okay, is there anything else?
I will say, though, that there's the concern, because you have to have quorum in the room before.
Right.
Yes, right.
If it's too easy for people to attend from elsewhere, because I mean, how are we going to get people out of their living rooms?
Then there'll be no decision.
Philosophical question.
Pajamas.
Okay.
You know, I mean, so there is the concern about
That
that.
looks great.
Any other questions not pertaining to that? Hearing none, I will take a motion.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. Meeting's over.